Well, yes, indeed. Focusing on the judiciary again today, we're joined by Mr. Layi Babatunde, who is a senior advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for coming on this morning, sir.
Thank you for having me.
Now we're looking at the judiciary. We all know that institutions have got to function if government of the day also have got to be able to perform the functions for which they were put in place. We'll start with the judiciary. Now that the tribunals are beginning their sitting, they've got that period for which they've got to sit for 180 days. Many also wonder, I mean, we've heard lawyers argue about whether or not that date is sufficient, if people will bring in delay tactics where the judges put their foot down and say, no, everyone has got to play according to the rules, he, chief, being chief of those who will ensure that he enforces that. Let's get your impression from what you've seen so far. Do you see cases being determined not just based on technicalities now, but on the substance of cases?
Well, the process of attaining justice sometimes can be a complicated one. The judiciary takes cases that are filed by other people. They don't file the cases, they don't call the witnesses, they don't make the presentations. What they do is to review the evidence, make their findings, and give their decision. And they operate within certain parameters. For instance, fair hearing. Every party sees that it has to be fairly heard, it has to be given the opportunity. Sometimes when the judge can see that reliance on fair hearing is just to buy time, but yet he has to conduct his affairs in such a way that those who are in the court premises, who are in the courtroom, they don't go away with the impression that, oh, this judge is not fair, this person has not been heard. So it's a very delicate act of balancing that the judge is trying to do. But for you to have the level of justice that meets the expectation of society, it goes beyond the person or the judges sitting. It is a collective effort. And if those who come before the court, whether as litigants or as counsel, if we don't all buy into this bigger picture of maintaining law and order, ensuring a working society, it will be difficult to attain. Don't forget, before we came to the issue of having to limit the number of days, it used to be open-ended. And somebody becomes governor, is sworn in, there's a petition against him. The petition goes on for 3 years plus. He has virtually exhausted his 4 years. Before then, we attempted to limit the number of days, but it was done by an act of parliament. It was argued that this is unfair. The constraint is too much. And the Supreme Court had to knock it down. Then it was opened up. It wasn't working. We had to go back to limiting it again. So that tells me something. There is something that is wrong beyond the issue of legislation, constitutional amendment, and all of that. Is our attitude. And the Waste report identified this critical problem. It says, look, so long as those who contest elections perceive it as war, it will be difficult to get anything to work.
Mr. Babatunde, you said it will take everybody working together to get this whole thing sorted out. But for every, in quote, game, there are rules and ethics of the game. Now, for those filing the petitions and for those hearing the petitions and looking at the evidence, examining the evidence, are there no rules by which they were trained for them to come to that field in the first place?
Well, certainly there are rules. And the court tries its best to ensure compliance with these rules. But like I said at the beginning, it is not always as straightforward as that. Let's take, for instance, as it is today, whether you are a judge, you are a medical doctor, you are a journalist, wherever, you have to find fuel to put in your car. There's no designated petrol station for a judge. There's no designated petrol station for a litigant. Neither is there anyone for counsel. So the judge gets dressed for court. He wants to go and sit for night. The driver is not there. He's told that the driver is going to look for petrol. What would the judge do? If he finds other way to go, somebody drives him in another person's car. So this judge is overzealous. Does he have interest in this case?
He's a judge.
And there have been instances, even with the tribunals, where judges assemble to sit. There's no light. Some are willing to sit from morning till night. There's no light. And they look at the environment. Even the security provided perhaps is not good enough. They don't want to risk their life and be unable to sit the following day. So they will rise and go. So the judges function, the tribunals, they function within this parameter.
So this comes back to our institutions.
Comes back to
our institutions.
Oh, sure. Sure. It comes to institutions. It comes also to those who have the duty to operate those institutions.
You know, your perspective is really very enlightening in the sense that oftentimes when people talk about the judiciary, they just think of the content,
right?
the proceedings that, you know, happen in court, which is a totally different kettle of fish, you know, as to whether or not the provisions of the law are sufficient to ensure that justice is carried out. But we forget, you know, these different parameters that also surround, you know, the activities that eventually happen in court. Is that what you meant by saying that we all have a collective responsibility to ensure that justice is carried out in the courts? Is that what you meant?
Precisely. There must be commitment. There must be commitment on the part of, for instance, the incoming president. When he went to collect a certificate of return, 1st of April, he talked about corruption. He talked about the depth of corruption. He described it as an evil that is worse than terrorism. But he said something. He said, look, we all have to join hands to fight this thing because it's going to be difficult. And it's the same thing for every aspect of our national life. If we don't ensure, you see, the welfare of one person is the welfare of the other. Sometimes people assume that if they can take care of themselves, society can go through whatever. They can go and mind their business. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. No matter how much money you acquire for yourself, if you have to appear before a court, to appear as a litigant. You can't buy a court near your house, so that when you are out to just you show in. It doesn't happen. If your case, for instance, is in Nekoi, and you live somewhere outside town, you have to find a way to get to court, no matter how rich you are. You have to pass through some certain roads, whatever. So we need to encourage ourselves to accept the reality of the fact that when we work so hard and amass so much to take care of ourselves, if society is not working, whether it's medical, it's justice, delivery, whatever you make of it, it will fly. But having said that, I believe that people must also take responsibility for the assignment they are given.
I was just about to say that, in the sense that the situation of the courts is no different from the situation of the hospitals. It's no different from the situation of private businesses, for instance. You know, we all live in the same society, and somehow we must manage to carry out our duties, our businesses, it would seem. So the courts cannot be excused based on, you know, the surrounding factors of society, can it?
Well, not completely, but part of the problem is this. The courts operate under very strict code of conduct. There are things a judge can do, there are things he cannot do. For instance, a judge can never descend into the arena. Never.
Never or should never?
It should never. It should not behave as if we were the litigant. So what does it do? It sits in court and is listening to you. Sometimes what the witness is saying is absolutely irrelevant. Sometimes it means the witness is lying. And the judge says, have you finished? He says, no, I still have more to say. He has to listen. And it's taking so many hours of talking irrelevancies. The judge has to listen. If I'm in my office and you walk in to see me and I say, excuse me, I have some other things to do. You have to leave.
So the judge is bound to hear all of that.
Unless if you become contemptuous in your conduct, then he will deal with you. But if it's just that you are presenting your case, and what is more, the judge can never direct a counsel on how he conducts his case. Never.